It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Joe Drape. Hey, Joe, how are you?
Thanks for having me on, my friend.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for coming on. So, you're an award-winning sports writer for the New York Times. Are you still writing for them?
I am. I'm busy with NFL football right now.
How long you been writing for them?
I've been with the Times since 1998, and I've pretty much done a little bit of everything over there. Horse racing, colleges, investigations, features. Long time. I'm an old man, Douglas.
But you're primarily a sports writer, yeah?
I am a sports writer.
Okay. And you've also got 6 books out. The one you're promoting now is called Saint Maker?
Yeah, Douglas, I have 6 books, previous books, all sports related. The Saint Maker, Inside the Catholic Church, and How a War Hero Inspired a Journey of Faith is my first Far from the Field of Plays book. It's a story about Father Emil Caban, who was awarded the Medal of Honor in 2013 by President Obama. He was a military chaplain, a priest from Kansas. And it is a story that came to me while I was writing one of those sports books. I was in Kansas, moved my family there to live in a small town to write about an undefeated high school football team who had won 67 in a row. And as I chronicled that, I kept hearing about this priest who was from those parts, who had died tragically at the age of 35 in a Korean prisoner of war camp. And, his exploits as a military man, he never carried a rifle or a weapon, but is credited for saving thousands of lives. And the fact that he was just like the people who lived there. And simultaneously to that, the Catholic Church, which I am a member, I was parochial and Jesuit educated, is having an effort to try to make him a saint. And I didn't even know what that entailed. So the second part of my quest was, how does one become a saint in the Catholic Church?
I assume you have to be dead to be a saint?
You have to be dead, and in fact, the average time between being dead and becoming a saint is 181 years. So it's a long, rigorous, and expensive process. And that's what I discovered as I followed Father Caban's cause through the wheels of the Vatican.
Okay, so what are the prerequisites other than being dead to become a saint? What is the process then?
It's a 4-step process. You launch your cause. You become a servant of God. And that merely says, I want to be, or somebody on your behalf says, we want this guy to be a saint. He lived a life that is inspiring and one of goodness and one that we all should aspire to. That's number one. Because saints are basically the superheroes of the Catholic Church. And to me, the most important is the second thing you need. You need to be relatable. We need to be able to see ourselves in saints and Father Caban. We got to see a little bit of us in there. It's quite a thing to ask to live a virtuous life, and only when we can relate to the person who did it can we even set our sights on that. And, why Father Caban's cause has caught up with military members and people from the heartland and farmers is because he was one of them. He grew up on a farm during the Depression. He worked dusk to dawn. He was resourceful. He could build things. He was a man of few words, was more a man of action. People can do that. People can see themselves in that. And when he found his calling, he knew he wanted to be a priest. He was in the seminary by 14, ordained by 21. But he really found himself as a chaplain in the military at a nearby army base. There he saw young men like himself who were guys who wanted to be part of something good, and he liked working out with them. He did all the training. He did everything side by side to him. Went to World War II, won the Bronze Star there. And, he remains the most decorated chaplain in military history. And it was really in Korea where he distinguished himself and made a name not only in the church, but he was a hero. He was on the cover of the Saturday Evening Post soon after. He was a guy that united 7,000 soldiers, be it Muslims, atheists, Protestants, Jews, and he did it by just being a leader and being a guy who recognized goodness in others and tried to be good himself. And if that meant stealing food from the guards to keep his guys alive, he did that. If that meant going out, sneaking out and foraging berries and fruits, he did that. If it meant trading tobacco, he was a pipe smoker to the guards for blankets, he did that. And, he really, on the battlefield, he's credited with saving hundreds because he was just fearless and in some of the most wicked fighting known in modern warfare. He would go out to the battlefields, foxhole to foxhole, and pick up the wounded with, little regard for his own safety. But it was when he got to the prison camp that this leadership and this virtue really took over. And he was a guy who could lift spirits and lift men. He carried a wounded soldier 60 miles for a month. Wow. On the death march to the prison camp. Yeah. And, it's when the war was over, his camp number 5, had the least casualties. And one soldier and prisoner of war after another came out when they were released in 1953, when he was long dead, and said, this guy had the will of steel, but the soul of velvet. And if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here today.
How did he die?
He basically was left to die, tortured by the Chinese guards, basically. And, that was a remarkable thing. He was a troublemaker only in the sense that they couldn't break the spirit of that camp and make them embrace communism. And he openly defied them and was a source of rebellion. So he had fallen ill, and when you fell ill in those camps, it was a death sentence. I mean, this was 30 below in the snow. You were living off a handful of bird seed, which they called millet, and anything else you could steal. These guys would spend hours picking lice off each other because the conditions were so poor. And he finally, he had lost 80 pounds, had broken a leg, was wearing an eye patch, and they saw an opportunity. So they went and got him, and they took him to this old monastery that the prisoners all called the Death House. And this was where they basically just brought the guys to die. There was no medical treatment. So when they came for Father Caban, there's a riot that broke out. And they didn't want to let him go. And almost immediately he stopped it and said, guys, I'm going where I want to go, and that's to see my Father in heaven. And not only did he stop them from rioting, he went to each Chinese prisoner, his torturers basically, and said, I forgive you, will you forgive me? And, it was a very powerful thing that these guys remembered forever. And, when he was awarded the Medal of Honor in 2013, there were 9 still living prisoner of wars, and they were one of a core group of about 30 who had pushed for, decades to have him honored that way.
I'm looking at something on your bio. It says 2 miracles. Is performing a miracle a prerequisite to being a saint?
2 miracles, and it's not performing it in the standard that they set. One, a miracle is defined as somebody recovering from near death or death, coming back to life, that defies medical or scientific explanation. And the second part is this reversal in fortunes happened because your family, your friends, your community prayed to the candidate, in this case it's Father Capon, and asked him to intercede on the behalf of their loved ones. And in this case, it was a young pole vaulter, college pole vaulter, who missed the mat, cracked his skull literally in half, was basically thought never to live, and miraculously came to life. And the second one was a young 12-year-old soccer player, a young woman who was in the hospital 87 days, and they didn't even know what she had. And they went ahead and took her off the ventilator and the kidney machines, hoping that, she'd find some peace. And out of nowhere, her eyes open, and soon she's able to recognize people and talk. And she's had such a full recovery that she is now a nurse and had returned to that same pediatric ward and worked alongside some of the same people who saved her life.
So another statistic here that is interesting, it says there are approximately 10,000 saints.
There are about 10,000 saints. Half of them are in Italy. That's a home field advantage.
Yeah.
And Douglas, some of the most famous saints really don't even exist. I mean, St. Christopher, the patron saint of travel, he wasn't a real person. He was a giant of legend who lived alongside a tough-to-cross river, and his job was to carry people across the river. And one day he carried a toddler, a 3 or 4-year-old boy, and it was the hardest crossing ever. He almost drowned. He never thought he was going to make it. He collapses on the other side, and the little boy says, it was so hard because you carried your Lord and Savior and all the heavens and earth on your shoulders. And you are the patron saint of travel. So, that's how it started centuries ago, as sort of a unofficial voice vote recognition of people or examples who some existed, some didn't. And then it has evolved over the years into a far more disciplined and rigorous system.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Love coffee, huh? But wait a minute. It seems like every time you finish a cup of coffee, you get all of these side effects along with it. Heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, acid reflux. As the world's first and only organic acid-free coffee, Tyler's Coffee is able to provide a healthier option in the solution for more than 100 million individuals who have sensitive stomachs or suffer from acid-related modalities. This is Tyler's acid-free coffee. Coffee without the consequences.
Wasn't there one called St. Anthony, the patron saint of hopeless causes?
It's St. Jude, and it's St. Jude of hopeless causes, and he was mentioned once in the Bible, and there's really no other evidence he existed as well. Now, St. Anthony, who you were thinking about, is lost objects.
Oh, lost objects. Okay.
When I was a kid.
Yeah. Okay.
When I was a kid, my mother used to say, when I lost something, she'd say, "Pray to Tony, Tony, look around. Something important must be found."
Okay. That's what I got those two mixed up. But so what was the inspiration to write this book?
I think God works in mysterious ways. I had come across this. An editor who had done a book with me earlier said, you ought to think about sport or something outside sports. Is there anything that interests you? And just out of nowhere, this popped in my head and out my tongue, out my mouth. It had stayed with me several years. I was kind of reading up on it. I didn't really think anything other than it was a cool story. And so that gave me the opportunity to pursue it. And then, where I think the mysterious way is, I had this great biography. I had this sort of sausage making of sainthood, which was fascinating and, had some interesting wrinkles to it. But the third thing that I was struggling with is connecting to the material. And what that did is that opened me up to explore my own spirituality a little bit. And I found that that was very necessary. And, I basically, Douglas, learned to reconnect and have an authentic relationship with God. And I hesitate when I say that because I'm not saved. I'm as bad as I was before. It's really hard to be good. We all know that. But, I did come to the awareness that you got to put effort into thinking about being good, talking to your higher power, whatever it may be, being a good husband, a father, a neighbor, a colleague. And if you do that, you will live a more rewarding life day to day. So, that's why I think I was put in position, led to write this book. And it really hit home with me is, I was finishing up right when the pandemic, I live in New York City, right when it hit here. And that was at the very beginning. 1,000 people were dying a night. Sirens were everywhere. And, it was a great comfort to spend part of my day with Father Capon. And, here's a guy who endured the most brutal brutality, who lived in a time of disease and division, and, managed to lift spirits, lift ambitions, lift aspirations, and bring comfort to a great many people. And, the world can always use some of that.
Well, I think so. And I think that people like that, have a certain cognitive awareness that this life is just a temporary stop, that they're off to somewhere better. So that once they have that realization that, this is not the end, this is only the beginning, it changes their whole perspective of what their priorities are here. And I find those people very fascinating. I mean, not just him, but other people who I've met and interviewed who have had, you can use different kind of terminology, but an awareness of the certain consciousness, I guess, is the word I would use, where they know that it's not just here. It's not just this physical life on Earth. There's more to it. There's a beyond. And once you get to that stage in life, then all the little piddly things that you worried about just have no meaning whatsoever.
I think you're absolutely right. And, Father John Hotsey, who's the other Kansas priest, a modern guy, still alive, who basically amassed 8,672 pages of documents attesting to Father Capon's life. He talks very movingly about this. He's always asked, he knew there was more than this. That's why he risked his self in the battlefield or at the prison camp. And, Father John says, no, this was a guy who knew there was something beyond here when he was 7 years old. And it's hard to pinpoint exactly where it is, but as to what you said, it's fascinating to figure out when they accepted that there was more to life, and then what they did after they accepted that. And that usually is great feats or heroics or compassion, or it can manifest itself in many ways.
Oh, absolutely. And you become almost like a teacher, because once you're convinced that this is not it and you're going to go somewhere else, then it's a matter of trying to get everyone else on your level, because it makes for a more fulfilling, rewarding type of a life when you have that consciousness, and then you see these people that are just worried about what they're going to wear today and what their hair looks like, and their whole life is a misery because they have a pimple. You want to help those people. You want to get them to somewhere else in their mindset, because they're just making themselves miserable over nothing.
Well, and you're right, and you hit on a bunch of points that I could bring around to Father Capon in Kansas and an educator. I found this while I was working on Our Boys, and Coach Roger Barta is a legendary high school football coach. It's the whole school. There's 60 boys in it, and most of them play football, and they beat bigger schools. And he won 67 in a row and a career with 8 championships. And what brought me down there was not any of that. That spoke for itself. But his rule was nobody ever talked about winning or losing. That the 2 rules were get a little better each day and to love one another. And that kind of goes to your teaching, educating. You build a culture, and a culture where everybody's pulling the same direction. And, you saw it with Father Capon in the prison camp is, he took the most dire situations and was able to have his men fight back against it and save many of them. And, you could see it on great athletic coaches. I mean, there's a reason that Alabama wins so many championships, and it has something to do with the culture Nick Saban has created there. You can see it with the tech companies. And, I'm not putting those guys equivalent on sainthood or greatness or goodness, but there is something to be said of creating a culture of looking past the here and now and saying we want something enduring.
Yeah, I agree. And some people have had that. You mentioned the tech companies, and immediately I thought of Steve Jobs, because I think he had that sort of foresight. When he was building these things in his garage, I think he could see the future, that we would one day, all of us, have 5 of them in our house.
And ain't that the truth?
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, we got to wrap it up. Unfortunately, our time is up. Do you have a website that you want to give out where people can come check out your book and check you out?
You can go to the New York Times and just go to Joe Drape and the New York Times. You can go to Amazon and look up Joe Drape. I've got some stuff there, but the book's available everywhere. So
okay,
thanks for having me, and on we go.
Oh, my pleasure. And best of luck. How's the book doing?
Doing very well. I'm very pleased with it, and that's selling at a time in a pandemic and a quarantine and civil unrest. And so, we're all living in this strange world right now. So, I think this book has a long tail too. I think, I'm hearing from people who are reading it and recommending it. I think people want to be uplifted.
Well, I think the message is very valid and very relevant for this time. And maybe we can all get beyond all the madness that's going on in the world right now.
From your words, from your lips to his ears, right?
Exactly. Absolutely. All right, Joe, take care. Thanks for coming on the show. It was nice talking to you.
Thank you, Douglas.
Hi, this is John Morgan, production supervisor for DJC Productions. And you're listening to The Douglas Coleman Show.
Lie there contented in the strength of the world. As long as it's still turning, there'll be oysters and pearls. All we are here for is to make you happy. All we are here for across someone who's in need of pain. The more that you give them,